Hey everybody, I'm in here making a quick editor comment before I actually start the video. I have updated my rubric because I realized that I've done nothing but confuse you guys since we started. The old version used to say +2 next to the love track because in my mind, love a track meant that you had already liked it, which was 1, and then you get the +2, which means 3. Apparently all I did was confuse everybody. Just to make sure we're on the same page, every track either gets a 0, a 1, or a 3. There are no 2 points. If I like it, it's 1 point. If I love it, it's 3 points. If I groan at the thought of playing it, it's 0 points. Alright, back to our regular show. Do you guys remember when the Lightning Cup was considered the finale? Who'd have thought that after all this time, the base game would only be a third of what the final product would look like? Although I guess there's a bit of a discrepancy of whether you consider Mario Kart 8 its own game compared to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Because if not, then the base game is 12 tracks, and seeing as how something like 85% of the entire Mario Kart 8 user base bought this game on Switch, then maybe it's time to stop referring to the Lightning Cup as the end of the base game, unless you're specifically talking about Wii U. There's probably a whole separate discussion we can have about how the Switch legitimized the Wii U, but I don't know if this is the time for it. Also, I feel like that was a popular topic on everybody's YouTube feed 3 or 4 years ago, so it might be a little bit outdated now considering how long the Switch has been out, and how much it's sold. But one final bit of trivia before I move on. If I'm not mistaken, Mario Kart 8 is the only game to be the best-selling game on 2 different consoles. The Lightning Cup is unique in that it's the only cup to make a shift from being a Nitro Cup to a Retro Cup. And that's because when Super Circuit came out on the Game Boy Advance, they decided that they wanted to have 5 cups. I'm assuming back then someone just figured the Lightning is the most powerful item in the game, so they might as well make that one of the cups. But I guess they figured the Star Cup was more climactic because they made that one 4th and slotted the Lightning Cup in 3rd. With obviously the Special Cup being the unlockable cup that comes out last. Then when they got to GameCube, they ditched the whole 5-cup setup, so the Lightning Cup was dropped. I do wonder if this was their chance to get rid of the Special Cup and they had thought about it. I mean, you can tell they were thinking about something because they switched the emblem to a crown. But they must have just decided to keep the Special Cup in there because if the Lightning Cup replaced the Special Cup, then that would be a whole other emblem you gotta think of for the 4 retro tracks. My guess is once again that it would have been Leaf and Feather Cup at that point, but maybe they just felt like the Feather did not have a commanding presence as much as Lightning did. But anyway, I'm going through every single Grand Prix in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and I am scoring them based off of this scoring system you see on the screen in front of you. Take a second to pause the video if you'd like to memorize it. I figure since this is the 8th video and we're effectively 1/3 of the way through the game, it's about time I actually start making a chart for this, so I'll share that on screen now. It seems like I'm already enjoying the retro stuff more than I was the Nitro stuff. I'm not completely surprised by this. I think they decided to put some of the simpler stuff at the front of the game so that it would get more enjoyable as you go on. Obviously there are exceptions and outliers, but that's just how it goes. And before actually getting into the analysis, I think similar to the Leaf Cup, when I look at the 4 tracks available for the Lightning Cup, in my mind I'm already thinking it's going to be another sweep. Let's not jump too far ahead though. I'd like to give each one of these the respect that they deserve, and hey, maybe I might figure out that I don't like one of these as much as I thought I did. The Lightning Cup is made up of the Nintendo DS's Tick-Tock Clock, the Nintendo 3DS's Piranha Plant, the Nintendo Wii's Grumble Volcano, and the Nintendo 64's Rainbow Road. So right off the bat, this comes from the DS, which is a game that I held very dear to my heart, and then it's also based off of Tick-Tock Clock, which is actually one of my favorite stages in Super Mario 64. So it's very hard for me to remove my bias for this. But I will say that if you look at the track itself, I'm pretty sure this is the only clock-themed stage in the entire franchise, so that's already pretty unique in and of itself. There are obviously different things that have been used to some extent in other courses. The little wheels on the side right before the finish line that speed you up or slow you down, I'm pretty sure have existed elsewhere. The big circular hub in the middle of the track that you have to pass through is just a giant clock now, but it's not like there haven't been little hubs like this that existed throughout the game. But the track has 2 or 3 segments that really makes it stand out amongst the rest. The map even looks like a deformed 8, but manages to not even remotely feel like you're playing a figure 8 track. I don't think I need to spend a whole lot of time justifying my reason for giving this one 3 points. I'm pretty sure this is well loved throughout the fandom. In saying that, I'm assuming a few of you will share why you don't like it in the comments, and I look forward to reading that. I do think that there's a scenario where the novelty might have worn off for some people, but I think for the most part, this one is pretty loved. Following Tick-Tock Clock, we jump to the 3DS's Piranha Plant Slide. This track kind of takes the whole concept of running through a Mario stage and jumping into a pipe maze and going underground and runs with it. It gives me the same surreal feeling I got in Cloud Top Cruise when I realized we were all driving on that climbable vine. This wouldn't necessarily be the main track that I choose, but I think this would be one of the tracks that I'd pick to be an actual stage in a 3D Mario. The view from the starting line alone makes me want to play this theoretical 3D Mario game. Anyway, when the race starts off, you immediately enter the pipe, and then just mayhem ensues. I like how the track evolves a few times as you run through it. I like the various hazards and obstacles you have to avoid. The low ceiling really gives you that claustrophobic sewer vibe. And I love the view and angle of the underwater section followed by the part where it blasts you up to go end up outside again. Complete with the classic brown castle walls and the Goombas all over the track. This is another one of those tracks that could either be a high 1 or a low 3. Similar to Sherbetland, since it's a unique track, I'm going to round up to make it a 3. Next up is Grumble Volcano, and I always mix this one up with Bowser's Castle. Specifically the track in the Special Cup here in Mario Kart 8. Which I actually assumed was kind of intentional because now both the Special Cup and the Lightning Cup share similar final Retro and Nitro tracks for their final 2 courses. Because obviously they both close off with the Rainbow Road. For all intents and purposes, this has always felt to me like a Bowser's Castle stage, except it feels like things are a lot more in ruins. The track is even crumbling as you go through the laps. The magma volcano starts off in the distance, and then you eventually make your way towards it. The map layout itself is unique, the obstacles are unique, there's a lot of chances for drifting, a lot of hazards to avoid. I often feel like Mario Kart Wii tracks tend to get overhyped just because of the hype of the Wii itself, but I don't think this is one of those tracks that got overhyped. I can kind of understand why people might view this aesthetic as bland or samey. I guess in the same way people often criticize the desert tracks. But what can I say? Part of the reason I love this one is because it reminds me of Bowser's Castle, and likewise, it gets 3 points. Okay, so first and foremost, Rainbow Road for Nintendo 64 plays like an actual Rainbow Road should play, in my opinion. They made a few changes to the track, mostly for the better, and primarily to add bumps for speed bursts and anti-gravity sections. The visuals in the background are some of my favorite thing about this track, and I think it actually does a better job than the original Nintendo 64 did. Which might be blasphemous because I think a lot of people had nostalgia for it back in the day. But I think the main complaint most people tend to have is the fact that they shortened it from 3 laps to 1. The other complaint I usually find is that people can't cheese it with shortcuts anymore. But I feel like that's more of a discussion that occurs with the more competitive scene. In general, I'm okay with the shortening because I remember one of the biggest issues and complaints that people had with the Nintendo 64 version was that it was too long. I've seen people argue that there should be 2 laps in the race, but I don't know, 2 laps just feels awkward to me. You either fully commit and go for the 3, or you shorten it up and go for the 1. I think it's okay that this was only 1 lap long. Also, the big thing about a lot of these Rainbow Road tracks, specifically this one, is that it's a single long track. There are no divisions, no alternate routes. I feel like increasing the length of it with its lack of uniqueness in that regard would make it a lot more boring, actually. You have just enough in there to make it enticing for 1 lap, but for the most part this kind of gives me Final Destination vibes. Like if I ever Mario Karted 1v1 without items, I feel like this is the track that I would choose. But I've never 1v1'd in any Mario Kart, and I've never not used items. Partially because we only recently got to actually turn off items, but mainly because this is Mario Kart, not Forza Horizon. I appreciate how vibrant they made the rainbow on this track too. The darker contrast of the colors makes it easier to stick out so that you're not mistaking it with the other tracks. I mean, you also got the golden railings that are a good callback to the Nintendo 64 version, and the bouncing chain chops and the train in the sky. I don't know, I feel like there's just a lot to love here, and I feel like the more road of a rainbow that Rainbow Road has, the better of a Rainbow Road that it is. Which is why, not only do I think this is better than the Mario Kart 8 Rainbow Road, which got 0 points if I need to remind you, this is good enough to get the 3 points. I remember when I got Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U and had to 100% complete it, this was the last track I had to do. This felt more like a finale than the other one did. This felt more like a finale than any other track did. And if they were only going to give us 8 cups and they were never going to give us DLC, I'm glad they chose the Nintendo 64's Rainbow Road to be the finale of this game. Even if I'm frequently getting blue shelled at the last second and not having enough time to make it up for it because this track is so short. But let's quickly tally all this up. Nintendo DS's Tick-Tock Clock, 3DS's Piranha Plant Slide, Nintendo Wii's Grumble Volcano, and Nintendo 64's Rainbow Road all earned their 3 points. I'd say they've all also earned their 3 points for diversity, and that's talking both in the aesthetics and in the map layout. A couple of them did get close because they were a simple circuit, but the complexity and the amount of turns more than made up for it. So really the only thing left is to determine if this is going to be a perfect scoring Grand Prix, or figure out if it's going to fall 1 point short like the Star Cup and the Leaf Cup did. It all comes down to the difficulty curve. I think the narrowness of Rainbow Road makes it the hardest track, so that one is at least in the right spot, so we'll move that one out of the way. I initially thought that Tick-Tock Clock might be a little bit too hard to be the first track in the race, but after thinking about it again, while it is pretty difficult compared to a lot of the other tracks in the game, I think it's still simpler than the other ones that are in this Grand Prix. It's probably the most complex first track in any of the cups in the game, but it's still easier than what follows. So really it all comes down to whether or not I think Piranha Plant Slide is easier than Grumble Volcano. Piranha Plant Slide for the most part is not too crazy, but there is the part where you get underground inside the pipe that I always seem to fall down in at least once per lap. That segment in there alone makes the track more difficult than anything in Tick-Tock Clock, I think. Now, Grumble Volcano doesn't have anything as difficult as that one segment of Piranha Plant Slide either, but I noticed the Grumble Volcano puts you into this false sense of security, where you think that the track gives you a lot of space to move based off the visuals, but in actuality a lot of times you end up off the track on the side and you have to build your speed back up, making it pretty difficult to remain at top speed. In addition to that, it's a much larger track with many more split paths, so you have to be on your toes and know when to react appropriately. And finally, as you advance through the race and the different parts of the volcano crumble and the tracks just get narrower and narrower in certain segments, I think while it's close, this does actually increase the difficulty compared to the last track. Which means it took me 8 Grand Prix to get here, but I finally found a Grand Prix that I would consider pretty much flawless at this rate. Now, like if I was to rank every single track that I played in this game, I can't guarantee that any of these 4 tracks will make it into the top 5 even. But what I do know is that when you put them all together, in the order that they're in, this so far makes for the best Grand Prix in my opinion. And the only reason I say so far is because if we do have a tie between multiple Grand Prix by the time I get to the end of this, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Partially because I'm still not sure what the tiebreaker is going to be, but we'll figure it out. But hey, we officially reached the DLC. Next, we'll be covering the Egg Cup.